This is the chronicle of the history of Yoahtl, a Minecraft community that has lasted almost 11 years, going from server to another server. In light of the latest server, Civcraft 2.0, closing down and the community awaiting a new server to migrate to, I decided to make these videos to help people understand the history of the civilization genre through the lens of an 11-year multi-server empire. I will be using the source, the History of Yoahtl, written by Mia, the third chieftain of the Yoahtlan community. This series of videos will detail the beginnings of Yoahtl on the server of Xephos to their move across various servers and finally settling in Civcraft 2.0. Get ready for virtual politics, war, and how to survive the collapse of a world. A quick note before we begin our video. The accounts as described upon the founding of the server are almost entirely legendary, as the chronicler, Mia, was not around in the Yoahtlan community until long after these events have transpired. With that, let's begin. On the first of the Minecraft servers, everything was essentially chaos. It was a very new game and a new world, and no one really knew how to play this kind of game. At first, it was very loosely organized, with people doing their own thing, mining, crafting, building, whatever they pleased. Over time, groups of players coalesced into tribes, and eventually, the tribes of the server of Xephos became known as kingdoms. These kingdoms comprised of around 7 to 10 individuals. As the continents of the world of Xephos became more and more populated, even reaching up to 200 concurrent players at a time, which was an absurdly high amount in the early days of Minecraft. The server became divided into two large groups. The Yoahtl, a large American Indian-based kingdom, and Texcoco, a Spanish-speaking Mesoamerican-based kingdom, which was believed to have players based in rural Mexico. The two nations were constantly at war. Few large battles were ever waged, but raids, structure griefing, and other such harassment tactics made life awful for any normal player caught in the middle. Through this age of constant war, a charismatic and skilled player, known as Yoahtl with an E, became quite prominent, gaining near unified support as the undisputed ruler of Texcoco. With his newfound power, he set about to end the era of warfare between the two nations and to lead it to prosperity. With his retinue, he ruthlessly cut down the various raider lords who had set up their bases in nearby towns and islands that they oppressed. With that, he gained near absolute control of his region, and then set his sights on making peace with Yoahtl. In the meantime, he consolidated his rule by building a mighty castle on an island, which he named Huron, after the Great Lake. Yoahtl reached out to another prominent player in Yoahtl, Wichita. Wichita held considerable influence within Yoahtl, but was not as unanimously accepted as ruler as Yoahtl. Looking to consolidate his rule in his region, and to expand his own personal influence, he agreed to negotiate with Yoahtl and discuss a merger. Bringing his own men, Wichita met with Yoahtl. on the island of Huron, with the congregation of players being known as the Huron Army. After the discussion, the two agreed to merge the nation of Wyandot and Texcoco into the Empire of Wyandot, with Texcoco serving as the name of its capital. With this merger, many were not happy with the sudden unification of age-old enemies, but all dissenters were summarily forced to assimilate or driven out of the country. Under the united rule of Yoahtl and Wichita, trade and construction flourished, and many kingdoms followed their example and conglomerated into empire. With that came the first true test that the Empire of Wyandot, the predecessor to Yoahtl, encountered. To the east, there was a rising warlike empire known as the Empire of Tordesillas, also known as the Great Eastern Tord, which made its presence known by systematically ravaging and conquering empire after empire. Within their own continents, they quickly overtook the Japanese-based kingdom, the Roman-based kingdom, and the Spanish/Portuguese-based kingdoms. But even as they conquered more and more land and began to act aggressively towards the Western people, no one took any mind, having long been safe under the watchful eye of Yoahtl and Wichita. That would soon change, as the Eastern Tord launched an invasion so swift, so skillfully planned out, that there was no attempt from Wyandot to even launch a proper counterattack, but instead were summarily ground under the Tord's heels, like so many other kingdoms. Only Yoahtl, Wichita, and a small war party of 8 or so managed to survive the lightning-quick raid. But under-equipped and still in shock from the force of the raids, they were in a bad position. So Yoahtl, working under the notice of the Tord, reached out to the nearby conquered leaders, slowly organizing a plan, naming the group the Yoahtl Revolutionaries. This time it's with an Y. Moving weapons and people under the cover of the off hours, they adopted the tactics of the Tord, meticulously scouting out the on and off hours of the Tord, their tactics and patrol patterns. Soon, a plan coalesced into a massive attack that, with a single chat message, was launched in unison. First, they went after the resupply points of the Tord, the chests, the bunkers, the beds, and any such thing. And then, every single Tord and Tord-aligned player was ruthlessly butchered and subsequently spawn-camped. There was no mercy. Tordesillas was overrun in a single day, and the strength of the Tord was shattered. In this fighting, Wichita and the Yoahtl Revolutionaries proclaimed Yoahtl, with an E, as the first chieftain of Yoahtl, with a Y. However, this came at a great price. Deeply upset with the fighting that had plagued the server, the admins decided to close down Xephos once and for all. The server wasn't ruined. A bunch of once great buildings were now in flames. The staff reflected and decided that it was time for the server to end, and so many players of all nations began to leave the server. But those most loyal to Yoahtl and its new country of Yoahtl, with a Y, stayed until the very end. He knew the server was coming to an end, but it didn't have to be the end for Yoahtl. Yoahtl, with an E, decided that he would also leave, but before he left, he gave leadership to his most trusted friend, Wichita. He told Wichita to make sure Yoahtl, with a Y, kept going, and to not give in or give up, and to make sure Yoahtl became something of meaning. And so, Wichita accepted the burden of being the new chieftain of Yoahtl, and led the people of Yoahtl to a new server to settle. This ended the first turbulent age of Yoahtl.